I will just tell you that God knows our hearts. God knows our hearts. And he knows if that individual is basically using a get-out-of-jail card by, I'm just going to do this, and this, then go in and ask for forgiveness. That's not a true confession. That's not a true confession. If you're doing it, and that's my get-out-of-jail card, now I'm pure again, I'm going to go out and sin again and go, no. God knows what we're doing. It's not like he's dumb. So he knows our hearts. So does he forgive again and again and again the same sins? Yep, he does, because we end up doing the same things over and over again. But he knows our heart. He knows our intention.
Well, it might make a difference, though, when you do pass on, what level you end up on. I tell you that.
Well, no question.
Yeah.
No question. Yeah, no question, because you'll go to the level that you ask for, if you will. I know I've heard it said that, some people don't believe there's a hell because God would never create a hell or whatever. And the bottom line is the people who go to hell want to be there because they couldn't survive in heaven. They have such disdain for their fellow man. They don't like God. They don't like what he had to say. They actually would prefer. That sounds crazy. But people, these people, I was talking to somebody about this just recently where there are people who are repelled by nice people. You know that. They just can't be around people who are too good, too nice. If you look at who attracts you, who's like a magnet to you, what media, what do you watch, what attracts you? People that attract you, things that attract you, media that attracts you, television, movies, magazines, whatever. What is it that attracts you? What is it that repels you? And you find out everything about yourself. I think that's a great way to start examination of conscience. Who am I hanging out with? Because it said that we are the average of the 5 people we hang around with. We're the average. Who are we attracted to? Who is repelling us? And you'll find out a whole lot about yourself and where you stand, I think. It's a great place to start examination of conscience, I think.
Yeah.
Because there was a time in my life, if I looked at the people that were attracting me, not good. Not good.
Well, I take it because you were in radio, like pretty much like me, started pretty much around the same time frame. It's a cutthroat business like you never would believe. If you haven't been in broadcasting, most people don't know how bad it is. I mean, it is cutthroat, and you can really become a jerk fast, just to get anywhere in radio. I mean, it's like me, and not, and I don't know if you went through it. I sure did. I kind of stayed away from that. I don't know how I did this. I don't know if this is fortunate or not. I was never much of a networker. I was never much of one, I need to know this person, because that person can get me a job. It was always amazing how, knowing as few people as I have known, literally, the right people knew who I was. And, I very seldom had to go looking for a job. It just was there. Just somebody went, oh, here. Oh, no, over here. And I just kind of followed without knowing a whole lot of people. Well, not just that. So, I mean, like I know that I remember the station manager or the program manager or director would come up to me and say, okay, here's your ratings. I want you to, get your ratings up, or you're going to look for another job. Or they just say, hey, your ratings are really good, but we want it higher. And if that meant to, it got really bad. I don't know. You were in Seattle for a while. Do you ever remember Andy Barber? He worked on a radio station called KING.
I absolutely do. I think I met Andy, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, me and Andy were somewhat friends. At the start, we were
Didn't he do afternoon drive? He did afternoon. Was it afternoon drive? Was that him? Where was he?
He was in King Radio, KING, when King Radio was playing Top 40. And
yeah, I remember him, yeah.
And I was in Tacoma at the station I was at, and he was always saying, his little thing is, I'm Andy Barber, I'm looking for a wife, and then I would come back and say something like, well, you can find one down on First Avenue. We had this little feud going, and then finally one day we met and we clicked, and, we became good friends. But it was really, hostile for, a couple months,
to the point where, he was doing everything he could to sabotage my show, and I was doing everything I could think about to sabotage his show, just for the ratings.
There are some classic battles like that. I don't know if ever there's certainly. You're right. There is competition. And there was an era before just a few companies owned everything, when every single radio station was like owned by somebody separately. There were some incredible games being played out there and devious things going on, and you're right, just trying to sabotage other shows and what they would do. Like I say, I tried to stay clear of that. They were just the competition. And sometimes you won, and sometimes they won, and who had bragging rights for the next 3 months until the next ratings book came out. I was very fortunate, especially when I got to Cleveland, at a couple of stations I worked at here, that we were generally number 1 or 2 in the demo we needed to be, and that pretty much was through the entire 25 years. So I'm very fortunate that way. I was usually the one being shot at, if you will, and then in the last year, our numbers just went in the toilet. It was just, and it was like, so I knew
what type of music, what type of format was the station?
Punk gospel. Kidding. It was kind of a light rock, soft rock, kind of middle of the road kind of thing. Female oriented, probably kind of a 60-40 women to men ratio.
What year was that? I know we've gotten off the subject, but we're getting down to
my time in Cleveland was 87 through 2012. Was my time here.
Yeah, the problem is too, a lot of canned music was coming out. A lot of stations were laying off people running canned music, and then everybody started going to playing the oldies, and I don't know. Radio changed. I don't know if you ever heard of Danny Holiday, but there
were a lot of holidays. I'm not sure I know.
Well, Danny Holiday was like one of the top DJs, I would say, in the 60s in the Seattle area. He worked at KOL Radio down in Harbor Island. And it was a top 40. And actually, he would come and pick me up from my house, bring me down there, and let me sit and listen to a show when I was a kid. And that also got me really infatuated with, being a DJ. But, it was different in that era. In the late 60s and 70s, being a DJ playing top 40, it was, I think, more fun. It was more entertainment. The announcers or the DJs had more liberty, to do their little skits, come up with their little things. Talk to the listeners, and then slowly it started changing, in the 80s and 90s and then on.
Yeah. Huge change. There's a lot of what's called voice tracking for the listeners listening now. It's called voice tracking. Sometimes there's nobody even in the studio.
No.
It's a guy who recorded something, could be days ahead of time, went in there and slipped it into the computer, and it kind of sounds like it's live, but it's not live. A ton of voice tracking. In fact, a lot of the talent that is heard in one city is also heard in half a dozen other cities doing the same thing. They don't even live in the community, have no idea what's going on in the community. They're just voice tracking in that city. So there's a lot of that going on. I don't know, Gary, where the new talent's going to come from, because they're pretty much killing off the talent by doing that. Where's the next great morning show if everybody's doing voice tracking and here, just read this card? I don't know, man. That's why I think some of the greatest air talent out there is in podcasting, because it's people with a passion. I know not everybody's great at it, but there are some really good communicators out there. I listen to podcasts and online radio like yours a heck of a lot more than I do listen to, terrestrial radio, as it's called. So I think they got a talent problem. I think they got a serious talent problem going on in radio.
Yeah, well, I don't think they have the passion that they used to have. Again, for people to understand this too, okay? And I want to change the subject the last couple minutes anyway. People don't realize, you're listening to whatever talent on the air. And you're right. They could be in L.A. You're listening to them in Chicago, right? They're announcing the station call letters in Chicago. And they're saying, their commercials geared up for Chicago, but they're in L.A., You know, and everybody thinks, oh, they're local. Well, they're not.
Nope.
But it's changed so drastically. And that's, like I said, a year ago almost, when Art Bell told me to get back into it, because he actually told me. And that guy I trusted like you wouldn't believe. And, you know, he was the god of talk radio. I mean, he came at the right time. He knew how to do it. He knew how to interview. But flat, he told me, he said that AM FM is dying. It's dying. And I think AM in the UK is going to be non-existent, or is non-existent. That's what I was reading here just recently.
Well, AM, if it wasn't for talk, I mean, and I think Rush Limbaugh is pretty much given credit for saving the band. And, you know, the music went away for the most part in the AM band because it can't compare with the FM side. So talk certainly has kept AM going. FM is where you're going to find your music now. But, there's just such huge changes. Not only that, here's the other part. Once upon a time, when you and I were kids and went, I want to be on the radio, that was the option. The option was, you want to be on the radio? Now, those same creative souls go, maybe I want to run a YouTube channel. Maybe I want to do something on the internet. Maybe I want to do a podcast. Maybe there are so many options open to some very talented people that those talented people aren't going into radio anymore. Those great talents are choosing another field to go into. You know, it's a little bit like when, look at baseball. Baseball, white man, there's a white man job, and then suddenly, no, it's a black man job. Oh, it's Hispanic. It's this, it's that. It changed everything, and people are looking not only at baseball, but now as the great athletes they're playing tennis, they're playing soccer, there are so many different options in the football and all that kind of stuff that a lot of times the great talents that normally may have picked up a baseball bat have so many other options now that it can kind of be a drain, I think, on some of the talent in maybe everything. Certainly media.
Well, you know, I also going to say this, you know, a lot of my audience are truckers. You know, they listen to the replays. They're out on the road at night. You know, the big thing is satellite radio. It's cool. But I don't even think, like Art told me, he doesn't think satellite radio is going to last forever. But the internet is where it's at, you know, and they're coming out with good internet radios. They keep improving them. Eventually, you're going to go out and when you buy your car, instead of seeing an AM/FM radio on it, you're going to have an internet radio on it. So you can go pick thousands of different shows.
Right. Well, how do most people consume your content? Are they listening streaming right now or listening tomorrow in a podcast?
Well, it's hard to it's really, you know, because I go through my own server. I go through like Speaker, I go through TuneIn, I go through all that, and I go through about 90 different apps out there. So when I take the time to research I'm on apps, honestly, I don't even know all the apps I'm on. I'm always finding out, you know, when I get all these little emails that, you know, these people are listening on this app I didn't even know I was on. I mean, I just recently found out I was on some app in Germany and doing really well. You know, it's interesting. The last head count we did here a couple weeks ago, depending on my show, okay, I can, with all the apps combined, the live show and the replays, I'm averaging for each show between maybe 18,000 to 60,000, depending on who the guest is.
Well, I'm sorry, there's only 9 of us.
Yeah.
Tonight for me.
Well, you know, that's one thing I will say. You know, unfortunately, you know, like I was using a server company, and then fed it out that way, but I just kind of got tired of paying their monthly rates and got my own server. So I feed out to, you know, all these different things, and one of them is Speaker Radio. I like Speaker Radio because people listen to the replays on it. Live on it, not very good. Off my website, a huge amount. iHeart, I get a huge amount. iTunes, I get a lot. You know, I don't know. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got a great audience, though. It sounds like you have got a great audience tuning in. So however you figure all the math out in that's pretty cool.
Well, what I do is we go through and download from all the different apps that we know of and get how many people are listening,